Hello everyone, my name is Gianna Darling and I'm a best-selling romance novelist. Today I'm going to do part 2 of my favorite romance reads. This version is my underrated version, the books that I'm so in love with but I feel like do not get that much hype. Book Talk has been so great for highlighting romance novels and romance authors, but it can get like a little bit repetitive obviously, so it's nice to see some recommendations maybe that you wouldn't normally see. So if you don't know this about me, even though I usually write MF romances, I have an FF romance called Serpentine Valentine, and my next release is MMF, which is two men and a woman, and they all have sex together. That's The Moon and His Tides, which comes out January 23rd. I have yet to write my own MM romance, just straight up MM, except for a short story I did with Sierra Simone, actually, called Not My Dirty Little Secret, which is no longer available. I might have to rectify that. But anyway, to kick things off, I'm gonna start with one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors. He is actually incredibly prolific. It's Tal Bauer. This book, he started out writing a series about the President of the United States and his head of security, the head of his security detail, and it's amazing. This is not that book. It's actually a different president, bodyguard kind of romance. This one, he is actually the vice president and the president goes missing, and the head of security, or this like Secret Service agent, is put on the task of hunting down the president. And the vice president and him kind of team up to try and find the president. So it's got tons of action, it's got tons of intrigue. Tal's books, there's always a lot going on. It's really a rich narrative, not just about the romance, but it kind of enhances the romance because you see the two main characters working together, overcoming obstacles. You see that they doubt each other a lot, and then they actually have to communicate, which is always lovely to see in romance. So this is a really good example of that. Also, the sex scenes are fantastic. This in particular, I think this is the one that I decided to pick for the video because the sex scenes are so hot in this one. Like, holy crap. You will need some alone time after you read this book. All of Tal's books, honestly, I have read all of them. He's actually taking a break because I believe that there's a sickness in his family. Hopefully he comes back soon, but it gives you time to catch up on all his works because literally all of them are fabulous. He does have a background, I believe, in police work, and so a lot of them do have that kind of mystery vibe as well, which just makes them much more intriguing and gives you something to sink your teeth into. So highly recommend Tal, and especially Secret Service. Actually, I think it was called something else before, but it's been recovered and it's a very sexy cover. Okay, next up is a behemoth of a book, but trust me when I say it's worth the journey. Wrath by Ellis James. It's a big one, as you can see. Oh my gosh, every single page is amazing. So Ellis, also known as Ella James, she also writes contemporary MF romance, but this story is my favorite one by her by far. It is about two stepbrothers who are very different that end up falling in love, but it is, when I say like it's an epic story, you'll understand just by looking at it that it's an epic story filled with angst and tension. It's one of those ones that even though it's long, it kind of has you on the edge of your seat. If you like angst, I highly recommend. Also, the spice is spicing like 5 chili peppers for when they get to the spice. Highly recommend this one if you love kind of college age new adult romance. This one is like the creme de la creme of, it's also sports romance. One of them is an athlete. So if you like those kinds of vibes, highly recommend. There's so many of those out there, and I really think that this is top of the heap. This one is kind of niche, but I love it. It's also a very thin read, unlike Wrath, which was like 10 times the size. Protection is a very easy read, but it's amazing. It is so good. Okay, I know it's gonna seem strange and niche, but it's a historical romance set in 1931 in a prison, as you can tell kind of by the cover. And it is so good, you guys. I don't know if you've read Alessandra Hazard's Straight Guys books, which are one of my favorite MM series, but she has a prequel that is an MM romance set in a prison. And after I read that, it's just a prequel, it's tiny. Unfortunately, also like this, I went searching for prison romances, MM prison romances, and this one's one of my favorites, even though it's short. And you guys, if you know me, I do not like short books. I do not write short books. I don't like to read them, but this is so rich and complicated a story, even though it's tiny. I think it's like 140 pages. T. Baggins packs so much into this narrative. It's really fascinating. Basically, it's Gabriel and Joey, and one of them claims that you know, they were incarcerated unfairly, and the other one has been there for like years and years and kind of takes him under his wing. So it's kind of got that like mentor-mentee relationship, you know, be with me and I'll protect you kind of vibes, and all the kind of high stakes adventures, if I can say adventures, it's a euphemism, that happen in a prison. Love this. It's actually not as dark as you would think. I mean, it is, and it's a bit sad, but it's so beautiful and poignant and well written. But it's not as dark as you may think for a prison romance. I know Nyla Kay also writes romances set in prison. She has a whole series. I've only read one of those actually, and this is not like that. It's not really as dark and salacious. It's more like a moving and incredible study of two men in prison. I have to say that like I love poignant romance novels, and this one really hits all the heartstrings. Okay, if you also know me, you know that I love Double Bisexual Awakening. Oh, it's my favorite. It's like my favorite trope ever. Not age gap, not forbidden romance, but Double Bi Awakening is my favorite. I just think that it really hits, and maybe it resonates with me because like I'm bi too. So I find it just really like hit something in me when I read about like the struggle to understand and kind of coming to terms with your sexuality. And The Rebuilding Year is a classic. Yes, I mean classic as in it's also old, which you can tell by this cover, which is honestly one of the worst covers I've ever seen, but do not let that fool you. What's inside this book is really incredible. It's about a ex-firefighter who has to go back to school after an injury to try and figure out what he wants to do with his life. And he ends up forming this friendship with the groundskeeper of the college. And they become friends. It's kind of this strange friendship, and it quickly has this kind of chemistry to it that makes them both kind of uncomfortable, and they have to navigate what it means for them to go from friends to lovers. In my first video, I know I talked about Crossroads by Riley Hart. It is also Double Bi Awakening, as is this. There's also a sequel to this, which I believe is called The Second Year, and it's also actually just as good as the first one. I love the obstacles that two previously believing themselves to be heterosexual people go through when they have an identity revelation later in life. I just think it's very relatable and very grounded in reality what these two go through with coming out at a later age after they've already lived kind of full lives. One of them, the groundsman, John, has actually been married before. So, and you know, the other one, I think his name, yeah, is Ryan. He was a firefighter, which sometimes there can be some prejudice in fire halls. So it's a really interesting read. The tension between them is so good. I love their sexual dynamic. All of these, you guys, are sex on the page, because why else would we read romance? I mean, I do read books that don't have spice, but I would always prefer spice just because I think that it's an elemental part of a romantic relationship. It's what takes a romantic relationship from a platonic relationship. So love the dynamic in this. Love like how real it feels, as in it feels like real life. Like these two exist out in the world. It doesn't feel like there's any jumping the shark, like it's over dramatic. It really feels like kind of an accurate representation about a situation that could happen any day to anyone. So highly recommend this book. One of my faves, and perhaps she's not super underhyped, but I do think that this book is more underhyped. Everyone talks about Head Above Water, which is also really good, but I love Don't You Dare by C.E. Ricky. Chelsea Ricky, who's incredible. I love everything that she writes, and her romances always have this emotional depth to them, which I love because it's the spice and it's the heat, and we want both. We want all the horny tears, and Chelsea always delivers. So this one is about, again, two college-aged friends. They're bros, okay? It's a bromance. It's like what happens if a bromance turns into a real romance, and it all hinges on a dare one night when they're drinking with their buddies. It's kind of like gay chicken. But the way that this relationship unfolds and the way that they interact with each other, and one of them in particular really pushes to communicate, and the other one is kind of more hesitant to communicate about this, the changing elements of their relationship. So there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of angst, there's some miscommunication, but you can just tell that they're really meant to be together. And I think that there are so many romances set in college that are really resonant because it's a time of reckoning. It's a time of awakening for a lot of people. You're out of high school. You can finally discover who you are without your parents in a new situation. But it's also tough because it's a microcosm, right? A college, it might seem like it's a big new place, but it's also small, and you run into the same people and you have friends who predetermine things about you. And that's what they face in Don't You Dare. I think that this is a really great coming of age story, as well as a double bisexual awakening story. Another classic must read if you love Double Bisexual Awakening. Okay, this is a little bit different. This is actually a like an urban fantasy book, and it's In This Iron Ground by Marina Vivancos. Guys, Marina Vivancos, there's actually another book in here, which I'll get to afterwards, in this pile that I'm recommending, because honestly, there's very few books by Marina that I don't absolutely love. The only series that I haven't read by her is her Omegaverse hockey series, only because I'm not a big Omegaverse girly, which always makes my friends laugh because they're like, but gee, it's everything that you love. It's like, it's power dynamics, it's, you know, sassy kind of omegas. It's great, you should love it. And I don't know why, it just doesn't work for me. But every other thing that she's written, I eat up. And this is a prime example of that. In This Iron Ground, also beautiful hardcover, or beautiful paperback. Marina just is such an exquisite writer. And for me, as you guys know, if you've been following me or read my books, I'm all about poetic prose, and this is just sublimely written. It's gorgeous. It really makes you feel all of the things. And basically it's about a boy who doesn't have the greatest life, and he ends up making friends with this other boy who kind of stands up for him. His name's Hacken. He meets Hacken, and he kind of becomes like adopted into Hacken's big wild family that live out in the woods. I honestly wonder, I do, if this was inspired by Derek Stiles fanfic, because also, if you know me, I love Derek Stiles fanfic. I cannot stop reading it. I've read thousands and thousands of Derek Stiles fanfic. If you guys want a whole vlog on which Derek Stiles fanfic I recommend, I can definitely do that, because I've read so many and I love them and I can't get enough of that dynamic. This kind of gives a little bit of Derek Stiles, just in that this human boy meets Hacken and is taken kind of into the fold of the family and gradually discovers that they're actually werewolves. And the magical element in this isn't so much the key to the book. It's really more the relationships and the connections between all of them. It almost feels like the pack and being a werewolf is a metaphor more for being in touch with your spirituality, in touch with nature and the world, in touch with your own feelings and your kind of your base animal side in a really like positive way. And so it's not really, if you're looking for like magic and explosions and a lot of kind of more urban fantasy, like gritty feel, that's not what this is. It's just a poetic study about a beautiful connection between a boy who feels very alone and neglected and the boy and his family who take him in and make him feel like one of their family. So if you love found family, I believe I cried in this one. I think I did. I think I cried more than once because it's so profound and beautiful. So I highly recommend In This Iron Ground. Also by Marina is Rat Pack. No, I will say Rat Pack. It's Rat Park. And oh my gosh, you guys, this book is so good. I read it on a plane and I sobbed on the plane. I did indeed. Now this one deals with some pretty heavy topics. Mostly it deals with addiction and what it does to your life, what it does to how it corrodes your ethics and your morals, and how something that you thought you could never do, you do just to get more drugs. And as a lot of these stories happen, you know, he's born into a family. Dominic is born to a mother who's addicted and doesn't really care about him. And it's how his life spirals until he becomes a young man. He goes to prison, you know, he commits crimes. He's really kind of at his lowest of lows. And then a police officer kind of takes him under his wing and tries to nurture like the positive parts of him that she sees, and like make him feel seen and makes him feel good and gives him the opportunity to feel good and to make positive, healthy connections. And that includes with her family and with her son. So this is a forbidden romance. It's an age gap romance. It's exquisitely beautifully written. As I said, Marina is just a gorgeous writer. And if you want to feel like you can't breathe because it's so intense and so beautiful and emotional. I definitely recommend this one. I really want to reread it actually. I just got it in paperback because she actually just started offering her books in paperback and they're beautiful. I think her covers are really beautiful. So highly recommend this one. Again, like the connections between her characters, you just really feel like they're soulmates, which is what I look for. This one is not something that you see that often, and it's a space romance. It's called One Giant Leap by Kay Simone. I have not read other books by Kay Simone, but, or no, maybe I have. No, I haven't. Anyway, it is so good, you guys. It is about Curtis, who is an astronaut, and he goes on a mission to space and ends up developing a rapport with the comms officer that is in communication with their ship while they're in space. And it's a really well written book because you can tell that there's even a foreword about it, about how this author did so much research about space travel, about the history of space travel, NASA in particular, and she kind of rewrites history. She even kind of has characters that she has a character that's basically Neil deGrasse Tyson. She has one that's basically Bill Nye the Science Guy. Thinly veiled changes to show, I guess during Obama's administration, they cut funding to NASA. And in this book, it's what would have happened if scientists and NASA officials rallied around and actually convinced Obama to increase funding instead of cutting funding to NASA. Really interesting story, just in terms of like feeling like you're learning something while you're reading, while also having a beautiful connection, this long distance, like as long distance as you can go relationship between an astronaut in space and the comms officer communicating with him. Just a great romance. It's obviously a slow burn because he spends most of the book in space, but when it does get to the spice, it's great. And I love kind of like a pen pal feel to a book, and this definitely has that, given that they're communicating just through the space shuttle. It's very cool. There's a little bit of action, there's a little bit of like, oh my God, is he gonna return home? But it's an HEA. I always recommend HEAs, and this one is such a solid read. Definitely never heard anyone recommend this. I think I found it deep in a subreddit forum. Really glad that I did because I love this book. Last but not least is one of my favorite series of all times. You guys have read it twice. I actually have not finished it both times because it's ongoing. So basically it's a very long series about one couple, and it starts with Pretty Boys by Gregory Ash. It's the Hazard in Somerset mystery series. And basically what he does is he does it in like quartets. So he'll do 4 books and then 4 books and then 4 books and then 4 books and then 4 books, like a 4-book series, but about the same couple. Obviously you have to start with Pretty Boys. Love the cover, love the title. Absolutely incredible writing. Like, I cannot tell you how beautiful Gregory's prose is. That boy, the boy Summers had gone to high school with, the boy with the scarecrow build and scarecrow eyes, had disappeared into someone who was stacked. Emory Hazard was a beast. The blue check shirt with coffee stains, had he been nervous or just in a hurry, strained to cover his shoulders and revealed massive arms. His dark hair no longer fell on his eyes. It was long, especially for a police officer, but still in a conservative cut and part. The eyes, though. The eyes were still scarecrow eyes. The color of straw at the end of summer. Almost the color of honey, but hard. Hard like they could crack the universe if it swung a little too close. Like, come on! That is so gorgeous! And seriously, Gregory Ash. I've read other books by Gregory. Have not enjoyed them as much as this series just because this one has just settled into my soul. But Hazard is this like, he used to be bullied because he was the only gay boy in this small town, and Summers was one of his bullies. And now years later, he's kind of returned to town in disgrace, and he's been partnered at the local PD with Summers. And obviously there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of hatred. Summers is like a good old boy, blonde, charismatic, but he's going through a divorce and he really wants Hazard to forgive him, and Hazard wants absolutely nothing to do with him. So it creates a lot of angst, a lot of tension. If you like hate to love, this is so hate to love, and it's a slow burn because they don't get together for quite a few books, but the tension is there like from the beginning. And I love an ongoing series with a couple that does not get together right away, and you just get to live that delicious chemistry, that sizzling longing and yearning for more than one book. And this delivers, it's top tier, god tier angst and yearning. The chemistry is insane. And even when they do get together, which sometimes can feel, the books can fall flat, there's still so much going on. The mysteries are incredible, very layered and very entertaining. I love mysteries, and this is definitely like police procedural mystery, but it doesn't feel rote or traditional. It's really interesting. And because it's an ongoing series, you can really stay in the world for a long time, which I love as well. So highly recommend this book. Don't hear it talked about ever, which is nuts. I don't hear any of these books talked about ever, which is blows my mind. So that is my little haul today of my favorite underrated romance books. Let me know if there's any that you would recommend in the comments, because I'm always looking for more reads and I basically only read romance now. So I would love to hear from you guys. Like, subscribe, and comment, and I will be back next week with more. Thanks for hanging out with me.